The wind rolled dry across the Texas plains, lifting dust like ghostly spirits from the earth. It carried with it the smell of cattle, sweat, and cruelty. On the porch of a weather-beaten ranch house, a girl sat bound to a post, her wrists raw from rope, her dark eyes unblinking. She was barely 17. Her name was Naya, daughter of the Apache, but here she was treated as less than a stray calf. A rancher, broad in frame and narrow in soul, gripped a pair of rusted shears. With a cruel grin, he dragged them through her thick black hair, letting the shorn strands fall into the dirt like pieces of her identity. Standing a few paces away was a cowboy named Jace Colton. Hat pulled low, jaw set hard, he said nothing. But inside, disgust smoldered like a fire threatening to catch. Backstory and emotional context. Naya had been captured in a raid weeks earlier. A skirmish between settlers and her people had ended in fire and flight. The survivors scattered into the hills. She was not so lucky. The rancher had claimed her as spoils, parading her in front of his hired hands as if to prove he had tamed the wild. He bound her during the day and forced her to labor when the sun sank. Yet what tormented her more than the ropes was the slow stripping of her dignity. When he cut her hair, he was not simply cutting strands. He was severing her pride, mocking the traditions her mother once wove into every braid. When he tore at her dress, rough hands pulling fabric, he wanted laughter from the men who stood around. But none came from Jace Colton. Jace had been riding fence for the rancher for 3 years. Work was work, and he took it where he could. But what he witnessed in Naya stirred something unsettled. He remembered his own blood, a younger sister who died of fever when he was a boy, and a mother whose spirit was broken by a drunken stepfather's hand. He'd sworn never to be that kind of man, yet here he was, watching cruelty unfold and doing nothing. His stomach churned, his fists itched. Still, his boots stayed planted in the dirt. Man versus self-conflict. That night, Jace lay awake in the bunkhouse. The other ranch hands snored or drank themselves to sleep, but he stared at the rafters, mind restless. Every cry Naya had stifled echoed in his skull. He thought of her mother somewhere in the hills, not knowing if her daughter lived. He thought of his sister, frail, coughing, and the way he had promised her, at 12 years old, that he'd protect the women who couldn't protect themselves. A child's vow, but vows had a way of haunting grown men. "Am I any better than the rest of them?" he whispered to the shadows. He told himself he was only here for wages, for survival. But that excuse rang hollow. Watching and staying silent, wasn't that its own kind of cruelty? The question gnawed at him until the night air felt heavy as stone. Somewhere inside, seeds of rebellion began to stir, pushing against the soil of his fear. Man versus man conflict. The next morning, the rancher strutted out like a rooster, kicking up dust as he checked the pens. He caught Jace looking too long at Naya. "You goin' soft, boy," the rancher jeered, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "That wild girl's nothing but a dog. You start pitying her, you'll end up with fleas." Jace's jaw tightened. He said nothing at first, but silence only fed the rancher's amusement. "Don't tell me you got a taste for savages," the man sneered. "Might have to cut you loose same as her hair." He grabbed a fistful of Naya's tattered dress and yanked, drawing a wince from her. Something inside Jace broke loose. His boots struck the ground before he realized he'd moved. He stepped between rancher and girl, shoulders squared, eyes like steel. "That's enough," Jace said. His voice was calm, but beneath it ran a current of danger. The ranch hands glanced up, sensing the edge of violence. The rancher's grin faltered before he barked a laugh. Well, well, the pup's found his teeth. He shoved Jace's chest. "Careful where you bite, boy. You're paid to mend fence, not save wild things." For a tense moment, no one breathed. Then Jace turned, just enough to shield Naya with his frame. He didn't draw his gun, not yet, but the line had been drawn all the same. First turning point. That night, the ranch yard lay quiet. Moonlight silvered the corrals. Jace slipped from the bunkhouse, a crust of bread and a tin of jerky hidden under his coat. He found Naya where they'd tied her to a post, hands bound. She lifted her chin when he approached, eyes burning with defiance, even through exhaustion. "Here," he murmured, crouching low, offering the food. For a moment, she didn't move. Pride held her still. Then her hunger betrayed her, and she snatched the bread, devouring it in silence. Jace didn't smile, didn't speak further. He simply set the jerky beside her and loosened the ropes, just enough that circulation returned to her wrists. Her dark eyes flicked to him. Suspicion, then something quieter. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. Jace rose, tugged his hat brim low, and turned back toward the bunkhouse. But his mind was already made. If the rancher laid another hand on her, Jace would act. Come dawn, he knew. Consequences be damned. The next morning, the rancher swaggered into the yard, chewing tobacco, eyes glinting mean. He found Naya kneeling by the post, wrists raw, dress hanging in tatters. With a mocking grin, he bent down and yanked another strip of fabric from her shoulder, exposing her skin to the jeers of the men. "See," he barked, "even savages look like women when you tame 'em." The laughter stung Jace like barbed wire. Something snapped inside him. His hand moved before thought caught up. The revolver cleared leather with a hiss, barrel glinting in the sun. "Enough," Jace growled, the word low and dangerous. The yard froze. Men stared. The rancher turned, sneer faltering at the sight of the gun aimed steady at his chest. "You point that iron at me, boy," the rancher spat, half disbelief, half rage. "I'll do more than point it," Jace answered. His pulse thundered, but his voice held like steel. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. A hand lunged for a rifle. Horses whinnied. Dust flew. Jace fired once into the air, the crack shattering the standoff. Men ducked. Naya flinched. Jace seized the moment, holstering the revolver, grabbing her arm. "Come on," he barked. He slashed her ropes free with his knife and hauled her onto a waiting horse. Bullets hissed past as they kicked into a gallop. The ranch house shrank behind them, shouts echoing through the dry wind. Naya clung to the saddle, hair shorn, dress torn, but her spirit unbroken. The desert opened wide ahead, cruel and endless. And for the first time in years, Jace felt he wasn't running from something. He was running toward it. Man versus nature. The wilderness swallowed them whole. The sun bore down like a relentless overseer, bleaching the land. Their canteen ran dry by the second day, lips cracking as dust clung to their throats. Rattlesnakes hissed from rocks. Coyotes yipped from ridges at night. Jace knew cattle trails and riverbeds. But beyond that, the desert was a stranger. His gut twisted. Had he doomed them both? Naya, though weary, moved with quiet purpose. She stooped near a dry wash, fingers brushing soil, until she unearthed tubers hidden below. She cracked them open, juice wetting her lips, passing one to Jace. He blinked, surprised. "You know this land." She did not answer with words. Instead, she pointed at a cactus, sliced it with a rock, and held the dripping pulp toward him. He drank, the bitterness harsh but life-saving. When a rattler coiled too close at dusk, Jace reached for his revolver. But Naya stomped once, sharp and fast. The snake recoiled, sliding back into brush. She met Jace's eyes, neither smug nor mocking, simply matter-of-fact. Bit by bit, he began to see her differently. Not a burden, not a victim, a survivor, stronger than him in ways he'd never imagined. The desert tested them both, but it also revealed what lay beneath. His ignorance, her resilience. Man versus self. On the third night, Jace stared into the fire's dim glow. The stars stretched wide above. His body ached, his hands blistered, but his mind churned worse than his muscles. The rancher's men were surely hunting them. Posters would bear his face by week's end, marking him outlaw and traitor. He'd thrown away 3 years of wages, a roof, whatever shred of belonging he had. But had he ever belonged? He thought of saloon laughter that never reached his ears, of bunkhouse men who called him half a man because he kept to himself. He'd always been a drifter, never at home. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted, voice low. He wasn't sure why he spoke aloud. Maybe because silence had become too heavy. Across the fire, Naya listened. Her dark eyes reflected the flames. Unreadable. Slowly, she reached for the canteen, tilting a few precious drops into his cup before taking none for herself. Then she whispered a word in Apache. "Shilgatsu." He frowned. "What's that mean?" She touched her chest, then pointed to him. "Brother." The word hit deeper than he expected, like cool water on a parched soul. For the first time, Jace felt something close to belonging. Not with settlers, not with ranchers, but here, across a fire, with the girl he'd risked everything to save. Bonding and trust. The nights stretched longer, the silence softer. Survival forced them together, but hardship carved trust between them. Jace showed her the revolver, hands careful as he placed it in her palms. "If we're cornered, you'll need this." She held it stiffly at first, unsure. He guided her grip, adjusted her stance. When she fired into the dark, the recoil startled her, but her eyes blazed with fierce determination. He found himself smiling for the first time in days. Later, when sleep evaded him, she motioned for him to lie back. She traced constellations with her finger against the sky, murmuring names in Apache. He repeated them clumsily, earning a rare, fleeting laugh from her. It startled him. Not cruel, not mocking, just human. Around the fire, their differences blurred. She no longer looked at him as captor's kin. He no longer saw her as fragile. Two souls, lost in a merciless land, finding in each other something stronger than either carried alone. And as the desert wind whispered through the canyon, Jace realized trust was no longer a choice. It was survival. Pursuit tightens. By the 5th day, dust plumes appeared on the horizon. The rancher and his men were closing in. 6 riders, rifles slung, the kind of men who would track through hell if their pride was stung. Jace knew it was only a matter of time before they found their trail. He led Naya into a canyon, narrow walls rising high, shadows cutting the sun. They crouched low, horses tethered silent. Footsteps echoed faintly, men searching nearby. One rider's whistle carried across the rocks, sharp as a blade. Naya's breath came fast. She pressed her bound wrists against her chest, whispering something low, almost like a prayer. Then she looked at Jace, fierce even in fear. "You must go," she said, voice urgent. "Alone. They want me, not you." Jace shook his head, jaw set. "Not happening." "If they catch us, you die too," she insisted, eyes burning into him. "Leave me, alive." He almost laughed, bitter, disbelieving. "I didn't draw on that rancher just to walk away now. You're not theirs to take. Not anymore." Her lips parted, words caught. She had no answer, only silence. Above them, hoofbeats clattered, fading slowly. The hunters had passed, but not far. Their time was running short. The showdown. The next evening, they reached a river crossing, a shallow stretch of water with banks of cottonwood. Jace scanned the treeline, unease prickling his skin. Something felt wrong. A shot rang out. Bark exploded inches from his head. Ambush. Jace roared, shoving Naya down. Gunfire erupted from both sides of the river, echoing like thunder. Bullets tore through branches, water splashing in violent bursts. Horses screamed and bolted. Jace fired back, revolver bucking in his hand. Dust and smoke filled the air. Naya clung low, but her eyes darted sharp, scanning. She grabbed his arm, pulling him just as another bullet hissed past where his skull had been. "Left," she cried. He swung, firing blind. A ranch hand toppled from cover. The rancher himself emerged from the trees, rifle in hand, face twisted in rage. "You think you can steal from me, boy," he bellowed. "I'll get you both and leave the coyotes to finish." Gunfire raged. Jace's shoulder burned as a bullet grazed him. Hot blood soaking his shirt. He stumbled, vision swimming. Naya's cry cut through the chaos. She seized a rock and hurled it, striking one of the rancher's men square in the temple. The distraction gave Jace precious seconds. He lunged forward, empty revolver in hand, and slammed into the rancher. They crashed into the shallows, fists and fury replacing bullets. Water churned around them, splashing red with blood. The rancher's hands found Jace's throat, squeezing. Jace gasped, stars flickering at the edges of his sight. He clawed at the man's wrist, but strength faltered. Then a cry. Naya's voice. "Brother." The word lit fire in Jace's chest. With a final surge, he wrenched free, seized the rancher's knife, and drove it upward. The rancher froze, shock etched across his face, before collapsing into the current. Silence fell, broken only by the river's murmur. Jace staggered, bloodied but alive. Aftermath and emotional resolution. The battlefield quieted. Bodies lay among the reeds. Smoke lifted into the evening sky. Jace sank to his knees, clutching his wound. His breath came ragged, sweat and blood mingling. For a moment, he thought this might be the end. Then soft hands touched him. Naya knelt beside him, her eyes fierce but wet with unshed tears. She pressed cloth against his wound, steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "Hold still," she whispered. Her English was broken, but her tone carried strength. He met her gaze, tired, hollow, but honest. "Why didn't you run?" Her hands didn't stop moving. "Because you did not." For the first time since they fled, words passed freely between them. No silence, no guarded looks, only truth. "I wasn't a good man," Jace admitted, voice rough. "I watched too long. Let him hurt you. Should have stopped it sooner." Her head tilted, dark eyes studying him. "Now you did." He exhaled, a shaky breath. She wasn't absolving him, but she wasn't condemning him either. She saw him as he was, flawed, broken, but changed. In that moment, Jace no longer saw a captive girl. He saw a warrior, an equal, someone who had given him as much strength as he'd tried to give her. The fire between them was not romance. Not yet, but something deeper. Survival forged into respect. Bittersweet ending. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised gold. They stood at the river's edge, the land stretching endless before them. Naya's torn dress fluttered in the breeze, her cropped hair framing her face not as humiliation, but as a mark of endurance. "This is where we part," she said softly. Her English was halting, but clear. She gestured toward the hills. "My people. I must find them." Jace's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to beg her to stay. But he knew better. Some journeys had to be walked alone. He nodded once, slow. "Then go. And don't look back." She held his gaze, 1,000 unspoken words in her eyes. Then she turned, walking into the rising sun, her figure growing smaller against the horizon. Jace stood watching, heart aching but proud. Sometimes saving another is the only way to save yourself. The frontier was a land of cruelty and mercy, of choices that carved men into who they truly were. Jace had made his choice, and it had cost him everything. yet given him something greater, the knowledge that dignity, trust, and courage could survive even in the harshest wilderness. If this story touched your heart, remember, the past still speaks to us. Stories of resilience and sacrifice remind us who we are. Backhand index pointing right, like, share, and subscribe for more untold tales of the frontier. Your voice keeps these stories alive.